Hey everyone. So anyone who's been in the fantasy book community for any sort of time has either said or knows someone who has said that they only want to read completed series. They don't want to start anything ongoing because for whatever reason, not going to name any names or anything, some people have the impression that fantasy series don't get completed. And people don't want to start something and get invested in it and then never see the conclusion. So they wait for the series to complete before they even pick it up. But first, not necessarily the greatest way of supporting an author because they need those initial sales in order for the publisher to keep picking them up and for the series to eventually get completed. But more importantly, at least more importantly to me, there's an excitement and anticipation that comes with reading a ongoing series. Like, I still remember the excitement I felt when Harry Potter was coming out and every time there was a new book and then getting that book and just spending the next few days doing nothing but reading. But if you wait for a series to be completed, you kind of miss out on that. So today I just wanted to make a video on my top 10 ongoing series that are worth checking out and getting excited for and reading while they're still ongoing. Now this list was made up with a few different determining factors. One, the likelihood of the series being completed is a major factor, and the wait time between books is something I definitely considered. How much I personally enjoyed the series, and then how far into the series are they? For instance, The Burning, which is the Rage of Dragons series by Evan Winter, I think it's been 4 or 5 years since book 2 has been published. And I loved book 1 and book 2, but that's a long time to wait for book 3 and there's still no date. That's not going to make this list. And then there's a series by Jim Butcher, the Cinder Spire series. Really loved the first book. I was pretty disappointed in the second book. So that's not going to make the list because I didn't like the second book, and that's an example of why I'm hesitant to put single book series on this list because they don't have a track record of success yet. I'm not saying there won't be any, but the odds are a bit against them from being higher up on this list if there's only one book out so far. So with that said, let's get started. My number 10 series is Raya Chronicles by Michael J. Sullivan. For those that don't know, this is a series of standalone stories following Royce and Hadrian before the events of Raya Revelations. So I really enjoy every single story. The reason it's this low on the list, is in number 10 and not higher up, is because they are a series of standalones. It's not really one continuous story that's building to an epic climax or anything like that. Just, you can read one, put it down, and then get to the next one whenever you want. Right now, there are 4 of these out, and he is planning on 8 total Raya Chronicles. So probably in the next 4 years, the rest of that series is going to be completed. At number 9, you have The Songs of Chaos by Michael R. Miller, starting with Ascendant. I really like this take on dragon riders where the dragon is blind and dependent on the rider. It's not such a one-sided relationship where the rider gets all the benefit and for some reason the dragon partners with them. In this case, both dragon and rider truly depend on each other, and they're not the only dragons in the world. Dragons are very common in this world. There's some that are bonded, there's some that are wild. So it's not we got a single dragon that's rising up to take down the evil empire that killed all the dragons 1,000 years ago. It's not that trope. It's still written in a very accessible and almost YA-ish. It's a good transition from YA to adult fantasy, but it's not the typical trope that you commonly see in Dragon Riders. At number 8, you have The Play of Shadows is book 1 of The Court of Shadows by Sebastian de Castell. This series takes place in the same world as the Great Coats, and it's a very similar writing style, except where Falkio hated magic, and since he was the POV character from the Great Coats, you never really saw magic because he was blind to it. This series embraces magic. So you're going to see a different side of Tristia, but you still have that same unique writing style that he brings to all of his books that I really enjoy. So I'm looking forward to spending more time in that world and just seeing where this story goes. At number 7, there's Spelled Swords and Stealth by Drew Hayes. This is book 1, NPCs. Oddly enough, NPCs is possibly my least favorite Drew Hayes book out of the, I think it's 25 of them that I've read. However, this series just keeps building, and books 3 and 4 in particular are 2 of my favorite books all time. So this series started off lowest on my list of his series and has risen to be my favorite of the ongoing series. But you could also mention Villain's Code or Fred the Vampire Accountant. If I didn't have this series here, one of those would have been in this top 10 list, maybe even his 5-minute Sherlock series. So right now he has 4 ongoing series. The one I'm most excited to get the next book out is Spelled Swords and Stealth, and that's why I put that one on the list. At number 6, we have The Last Horizon by Will White. This is his sci-fi series, 6 epic heroes going on 6 epic adventures and helping each other meet their ultimate goal and achieve amazing things that will be talked about for all of history. That's what this series is. So each story follows a different hero closely, and you kind of get their quest. And I'm guessing by the end, it's going to be a 7-book series. It's just my guess, because you have the 6 positions in the ship, and then you have the ship itself, which does have a mind of its own and really seeks out adventures. So far, there's 3 books out. Again, I'm guessing 7, and they've been coming out about 1 a year, so in about 4 years, this series should be completed. And for all the books I've talked about so far, or the series I've talked about so far, almost all of them average about 1 book a year. Songs of Chaos, the books have gotten bigger, so it's extended a little bit beyond a year for this next book to come out. And Spelled Swords and Stealth by Drew Hayes, that is a couple more years between each book because he has 4 or more ongoing series at a time. So he rotates between them, but there are already 5 of these books out, and he is a very quick writer, 25 or more books in about 10 years. So even with him rotating, it shouldn't be too long before you get the next book in that series. Now, I mentioned that books or series that only had 1 book in them were less likely to make this list. But it didn't mean they weren't going to make it at all. And coming in at number 5 is Hierarchy. This is the new series by James Islington, first book, The Will of the Many. This book was so good, I couldn't keep it off the list. Hopefully, Strength of the Few lives up to the standard set by Will of the Many, and if so, this is going to move higher up into my top 5. This is possibly my favorite book 1 of all time. As far as frequency of the author publishing, it's about a 2-year rotation between each book. Now, the second book, he said, has already been written and is with his publisher now. So they're just going through final edits, and then we'll set a publication date. And he's already started writing book 3. So now we're to the top 4 of this list. And this is where they could really get to almost any order. And I'm kind of shocked with the series that I'm putting at number 4. But that's going to be The Dresden Files by Jim Butcher. One of my all-time favorite series. There's 17 books out already, 2 short story collections, few novels and other short stories. So there's plenty of reading, and you got plenty to keep you occupied while getting caught up and waiting for the next release to come out. The reason this is not higher is strictly because he has slowed down with how fast books are coming out. Now, he published 2 books in 2020, and then he switched to Cinder Spires and hasn't gotten another Dresden book out since then. So it has been a few years at this point, but last I looked, he was about 80% done with book 18. So he's slowed down, but he hasn't come to a stop, and I still trust him to get more of these books out and eventually finish the series. But right now he's bouncing between Dresden and Cinder Spires, so it does take a bit longer before you get the next book in either of those series. Number 3, again, these top 3, ask me on any given day and it'll be a different answer, and maybe recency bias is playing into these, how recently I read them or did a reread of them. But at number 3, I'm going with The Bound and the Broken by Raya Chronicles. If you followed my channel, you know I love this series. It's one of my all-time favorites. He puts out a book about once every year, maybe 15 months. But his books have now reached a length that they're about 400,000 words, so that naturally takes a bit longer to come out. But he does plan on book 4 coming out pretty early, 2025. This is just an excellent, epic Dragon Rider story for adults. It starts off a bit tropey, not gonna lie, don't want to set expectations wrong there. But once you get to book 2 and book 3, it's absolutely fantastic. Some of the best stories I have ever read. Raya Chronicles is one of those authors that I think is going to be a mainstay in fantasy for a long time. Coming in at number 2 on this list is a series I've never mentioned on this channel before. It's one I wasn't planning on reading. I would have never picked up on my own, but eventually I gave into the hype and needed to see what it was all about, and then I absolutely loved it. And that is Dungeon Crawler Carl. Read the whole series back in July, and I've already reread the whole series because it was such a good time. Book 1, I gave 4 stars. Everything else after that has been 5 stars for me. Loved every minute of reading this series. And I think he started in 2020 and already has 6 books out. So just simple math, 3 books every 2 years. Might slow down because the last 3 books have been about twice as long as the first 3 books. So we'll see where it's going. He's predicting it's going to be about 8 or 9 books. So we're getting to the end at this point. So it might only be another 2 or 3 years before this series is complete. But tons of hype around it, and definitely worth the hype and worth checking out. Even if lit RPG isn't your style or you don't typically like these types of stories, give it a try. Its first book is really short, so you don't have much to lose. You may find a new favorite series like I did. If not, you can definitively say lit RPG, not for me. And that's fine. No book is for everyone. Now, number 1 on my list, probably not much of a surprise at this point, but that's going to be Stormlight Archive by Brandon Sanderson. There's not much to say about this series that hasn't already been said, but 4 phenomenal books. The first 3 are probably 3 of my favorite books all time. Book 5 coming out in just a couple more months, so that will be a completed arc of Stormlight Archive. You'll have all of Era 1. So if you start now, with the length of these books, you might be able to be caught up right as Book 5 comes out, and that would be perfect timing. So those are my top 10 ongoing series. Let me know in the comments, what's your opinion on, do you read ongoing series or do you wait for them to be completed? And if you do read ongoing series, what are some of your favorites? And until next time, bye.